does the European Union of today compare to the one that you found in 1985?
The first thing to say is that we started at 6, then we became 9 in 73, we became in 81 with Greece, we became 10, then 12, then in 95, 15, in 2004, 25, 2007, 27, in 2013 with Croatia, 2028, and unfortunately, after the British vote, we've gone back to 27, but still, going from 10 to 27 is major and shows the attractiveness of the model. And it also helped us overcome this totally artificial divide in Europe because of the Iron Curtain, where half of our European brothers were left outside. Now, in 85, as I mentioned, there was treaty change, Single European Act, Maastricht, and then there was a string of treaties leading up to the Lisbon Treaty in 2009. And in a nutshell, with those treaty changes, a certain number of things were changed. More competences, for instance, in environment, in various other issues. A revamped legislative process which led to full co-decision, for instance, more qualified majority voting, a much more complete single market on the 4 liberties. Although I have to add, it's still not completed. For instance, in services, we still struggle with a single market. A single currency, the euro, which of course now gathers 19 out of the 27 member states, and over time will integrate most of the others too. A much more structured foreign policy, which, as I said before, had been left outside initially, and with mechanisms, high representative, with military committee, and all of those kinds of things, which help you run a better foreign policy. And of course, the integration of Schengen, including police cooperation and issues like that, into the treaty. There is an important issue we're now discussing a lot. It's the question of a reform of the common migration and asylum policy. Very complicated. We're not there yet. But it is also, I think, going to happen.
From what you described, it seems that throughout the history of the European Union, there was always tension between how much power is given to supranational institutions and how much power is retained by the national governments. You referred earlier to the European Defence Community, which did not see the daylight in 1954. There were other difficult moments as well. For example, in the 1960s, President de Gaulle boycotted the council meetings for the entire 9 months because he was upset about the supranational element of the European communities. How supranational is the European Union today? Or is it mainly the member states that are calling the shots? Who is governing the European Union?
As I said at the beginning, it's important to understand that the level of integration varies according to policies. The more intergovernmental the policy, the more power lies with the member states via the Council and the European Council. That is incidentally why the Commission and the European Parliament are always pushing for communal rights policies, because they want to apply the community method as much as possible, because they think it leads to better results, and sometimes member countries resist this movement. So there is this tension you mentioned, which came out in the 60s when President de Gaulle called for the French no longer to sit in the council meeting for several months, which was quite, and it was about powers. It was about supranational powers, and it was about the CAP too. Or you had this debate when we did the Maastrcht Treaty, where Jacques Delors was fighting not to have a separate pillar for CFSP, but to integrate it into the Union. I think that was not realistic. Then it's not even now, because the choice was not between an intergovernmental and a community one foreign policy. It was about an intergovernmental one, or not at all. Now, having said all of this, I have to say something about a very important development which took place in 1974. It's the creation of the European Council. Because I described the institutional framework, but in fact, one of the major actors of this was not created by the treaties. It created itself. It's the heads of state and government. Why? Because the Union was beginning to develop. They said, It's not possible. We are the only politicians who do not meet among ourselves. All our ministers do, but we can. Secondly, as the Union was developing its trade policy, development policy, and other things, it was impossible to simply say, we have nothing to say about foreign policy. But there was no mandate to do that. So you could do this at the level of the heads of state and government. So it was created de facto in 1974 as an intergovernmental body. And ever since, it has provided guidelines, orientations. It has asked the Commission to do things. It has set deadlines and all of this via its conclusions, adopted by a consensus. All of this was actually at some stage recognized in the treaties, and in the Lisbon Treaty, they decided to actually translate this into a new institution, the European Council. But basically, it functions more or less in the same way. The only difference is that now we have a permanent president of the European Council. This is a very important development because for me, in my experience, nothing we've done since 1985 was done against the European Council. And a lot was done at the behest of the European Council.